thank you very much for coming. And I'll just ask you in general, what's your first knowledge of Friends of the Caw as an organization, and how were you ever, if so, affiliated with them?
Okay. Well, I was reading your email of all the topics, the questions that you might ask, just driving here when I stopped to get gas. And I thought, oh my, I knew most of the founders way back when. Lance Burr had been my attorney during the Troubles in the early 70s after Kent State and all of that. So that's how I had known Lance. And everybody knew everybody in Lawrence at that time. So I knew the founders, but then I left Lawrence and stayed in contact with people, still am.
Some previous interviewees, everyone knows that we were, not me, I wasn't born and raised here, but people who were always told to stay away from the river, it's dangerous, it's, there's quicksand and there's whirlpools. But you spent time on the river as a young person, right?
Well, I was always a rebel. Probably say you can't do that, and then there are my faces in it. What is this that I can't do? Well, I loved that, but it was, people don't realize today, or maybe that myth still has people gripped in fear. But yeah, the river was something to fear, which was bizarre because it was such a beautiful place. I mean, my God, the wildlife and the change of seasons. So I don't know, as soon as I got a car when I was 16, a 1953 Chevy. And that gave me license literally to go anywhere. And I started hanging out at a place, I think it was called, later I found out, Smith's Crossing, where the Kansas Museum of History is. There's Murphy's, I forget. There's a hill right there, and there was a county road that went straight north from where the entrance into the History Center is. And it dead-ended, but you could go north all the way to the river. And so I don't know how I found this place, but I could park there, cross the railroad tracks, and the first 20 feet of water was where the current kind of cut by one of the jetties that had been placed there. So that first part was over your head maybe, but only for a few feet. Then it was, chest high, waist high, then knee high, and you could wade across to this wonderful island. And I think you've actually painted that island. We talked about that once.
From the air.
Because you have or at least a photograph showing the island from the air looking west from about Gage or somewhere like that maybe. Or the Westgate Bridge maybe, probably. Anyway, so I as a child growing up in Topeka, it was kind of traumatic in many ways. And I always wanted a place to escape to. So I found this island, my own island. And I don't know how long it was before I shared it with friends, which was a big mistake because then it became a Saturday night party place. And
did you have it to yourself before, pretty much?
Oh, for at least a year, yeah. Maybe longer, I don't remember. I was working at Topeka Civic Theater when I was 16 also. And sometimes, I don't know, somehow I shared it. And so we called it Mike Island because there were 3 Mikes, part of the gang that would go there. And anyway, I just, that made me feel safe knowing you have to respect it. But in my 73 years, I've never encountered quicksand. I guess it exists, but I've never encountered it. And you go with the flow. If something's sweeping you away, you don't fight it. Like in surf, you swim parallel to the beach. In the river, there's ways. But I guess I shouldn't be cavalier because there have been a number of deaths. People not familiar with it, I guess. I don't know.
So, so what'd you do on Mike's Island? Is that kind of a Huck Finn thing? You just like spend a day out there roaming around and
Well, you could find, you know, prehistoric bison bones, not the modern bison, but the old ones. Horse teeth from the Pleistocene. Uh, well, and then too, oh my God, I don't know if it's true now. You could tell me, but the junk in that river, oh my God, just dump it off the bridge. And unfortunately, what I remember most are the chemical herbicide containers.
oh,
Just float. Do you find those now? I hope not.
I hope
If
not.
there's
They're
more.
probably sunk. They're probably behind Bowersock Dale.
Well, I know you're still doing batteries.
Well, yeah,
but
tires and batteries and I mean junk for as long as Europeans
have been here.
settled on the banks of the river. Everything has been dumped in the river, and you will find it.
Yeah.
Eventually, washing up on sandbars. So this was upstream from Topeka. So there were major dumps up that whole way up along there, or just kind of random places.
Well, you were getting Manhattan, all its debris, and Junction City, and all the farmland in between.
So these were like floating canisters of
that after
Mm.
high water, that's where they ended up. And if they didn't have a lid on, then they'd get buried in the sand. And
So Mike's Island, as I recall, a pretty well established, fully vegetated trees, everything. So it's a very stable island because it's still there. I mean, if it was there
I haven't been
70
there
years
recently,
ago,
but
like
the last time I looked, it was still there.
yeah, I mean,
Well, it was relatively new then, or at least the
because a lot of the sandbars come and go,
Right,
and reform, and
Yeah.
that. So that's
So you asked what I did. I don't know what I did. I just looked at the clouds. I don't know. Just escaped,
artistic dreaming. And
Who knows? I was 16.
I just imagine, like, this Huck Finn adventure thing. And you weren't floating. You were just wading out there and exploring.
No, and that's why, I'm so crippled with arthritis now, and my shoulders are both shot. But I so want to kayak sometime. Maybe
I could put you in the front of a canoe.
I know, something like
I'll paddle you. Yeah.
And then later in life, when I moved to Wabunsee County in the 80s, I would go to where Mill Creek flows into the Kaw, because there's a Kaw Indian Village site there, and I was always trying to figure out from the maps where was it, and eventually I did. The map was wrong, unless there's another village there. But it's such a wonderful
That's a beautiful
place because
area.
there are all these mature oaks along the lower reaches of Mill Creek. But unfortunately, again, with what we've done to the river with the reservoirs, now with flood control, when we get a big rainstorm in the upper reaches of Mill Creek, it normally in times of flood in the past, the water would have backed up way up Mill Creek from the river when the river was in flood. Well, it doesn't flood anymore, so when we have a 6-inch rain in the uplands, the water races down to the Kaw, and it cuts the banks in ways that it never did before. So you have all these hundreds-of-year-old oaks falling into the creek. It's really sad to see, and that's happened around where Mill Creek flows into the Kaw. Plus, Mill Creek, when the Potawatomi had their reservation here in eastern Kansas, it was 30 by 30 square miles. And there was a crossing on Mill Creek right there, and it's still there. If you cross off I-70 and to go into Maple Hill, there's a bridge over Mill Creek, and if you look to the east, it's all a solid limestone ledge. So obviously that's the best place to cross a stream is on this ledge. And that's a really old trail from the 1840s. Anyway, right east of there, the government built two mills for the Potawatomi. And the Boursall family, Barassa, it's changed over time, they had an inn there. And there's lots of accounts of travelers staying at that inn. They had a grand piano. They spoke French because
Wow.
they were, a lot of French influence with some Potawatomi families. And anyway, so the finding of the ruins and all that became an obsession for me, and getting the Potawatomi involved, and then the State Historical Society and everybody. And so that was a branch of the call. So I'm still really, I don't go there like I used to because I'm just running around all the time. But
There's no public access around Mill Creek there, right? Were you trespassing, or did you know the landowners there? I can't think of like where Mill Creek meets the Kaw.
Well, I suppose I knew the family.
You did? Okay, yeah.
And I think it's may have changed hands now.
Okay, yeah.
But the Bursalt business, definitely with the land.
But yeah, and then there's Cross Creek there, because I've recently done some paintings, and that is incredibly beautiful. That whole sweep there from the air, just so many sandbars and so gorgeous. But yeah, so back to Friends of the Cause. One of our missions was their mission. Initially was to stop dredging. Otherwise, none of that sand would be there.
Oh, it would have totally transformed the river.
Yeah.
We wouldn't know.
So it went from like 19 permits to 3 today, I think. 3. To my knowledge, they weren't dredging so much out there as in the deeper easternmost reaches. So did you know anyone who paddled on the river or accessed it in any other way?
Unheard of in those days. And I remember the first time I saw an airboat, I thought, because I'd lived in Florida, and I thought, oh my God, an airboat boat on the Kaw?
Yeah. Well, it makes sense because of the sand, but...
Yeah. I mean, because people in Wamego have airboats, if that's what you would call them. But, that's a whole different thing. That's trapping and fishing and hunting and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, the Kaw was classified as navigable at some point. There were a couple dozen steamboats that tried to.
Well, and then the railroad interests wanted to put. You probably know that they wanted to put bridges in, so they lobbied to kill it as a navigable stream.
No, I'm not real.
Capitalism here,
of course. Yeah, of course. Highways and roads and bridges and.
I would like to say about the founding of Friends of Kaw. What year was it? 80?
No, they got together to fight the dredging in the early 90s, so 91-ish.
Okay.
And then became officially incorporated nonprofit in 97. So the origins were early 90s.
But I think the consciousness... I went to school in Lawrence, and I actually started coming here when I was 16, same when I got the car, because... Having worked in Topeka Civic Theater, all my friends were older. I was one of the youngest, serving beer when I was 16 at the Drunkard. Don't tell anybody.
You're on
Statute
camera.
of limitations is over. Anyway, so I just followed my friends on the weekends to Lawrence. And, and I think, nowadays... baby boomers get a bad rap for all the problems that we're facing now as a world and as a culture and as a country. But it wasn't the boomers, at least the people that I was associated, we recognized the problems and we tried to solve them. End the Vietnam War, all of that. Stop this dredging that was ruining the river. And, I don't think we get enough credit for all that, because definitely the blame for where we are today, it's everybody's tainted. Every generation since this country was founded led to where we are today. Sorry, folks, the pursuit of almighty dollar, And, the generations coming up, it's in their face. I mean, I can't imagine facing what's coming.
And that's what I've been asking people, too. It's like, a young person, 50 years from now, is going to want to ask us questions and won't be able to. So this is our opportunity to say, what if, if they say, I want to start a nonprofit to protect this river, what do I do? What's your advice to me,
Well, in my case, I started a nonprofit.
You have started nonprofits?
To protect a historic site.
Mm-hmm.
It's called the Mount Mitchell Heritage Prairie Park, and it's only 3 miles from the call,
Mm-hmm.
South of Wamego. And I hope someday that we will be closely affiliated with Friends of the Call, because we're teaching site on so many levels: Native American history, European settlement, frontier expansion, the Underground Railroad, all these subjects. Plus, we're restoring prairie, plus the geology. It's where the last glacier stopped.
Mm-hmm.
It's a wonderful educational facility, plus it's recreational.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, the state had been given that property, and they were going to give it back to the family because they couldn't fulfill the terms of the gift, which was to create a state park.
Oh.
And so we, just a grassroots effort out there, said, and some Lawrence people helped, said, no, this can't happen. And so we formed a nonprofit, and now we've had it for almost 20 years. And it's just this beautiful park where it's a monarch sanctuary. So the monarchs come through, especially in the fall. They're there now, actually.
Wamego is a hot spot. I know.
Yeah. Oh, it's just, it's such a special place. So, to your question, just you have to, if you recognize something that you feel that needs to be done, just do it.
Mm-hmm.
There'll be obstacles, but just you have to have a certain passion for it and just pursue it. But Mount Mitchell's been an incredible success story. I'm very pleased about it.
I hope for that partnership too. I know you're working on it with Friends of the Caw, and Friends of the Caw's mission from the beginning has been access, getting people on the river so that they know what's there to appreciate, to love, and help preserve. But if you're not on it, if you don't know how beautiful it is, and the history and the wildlife, and
you say history, I should tell you this story in case it doesn't come through in the previous interview.
Tell me anything others are going to miss about related to the history of the
one of those
river.
Times at Mike Island, it was on a weekend, and we were all carting our six-packs or coolers, whatever we did, and yeah, it was great fun, especially with theater kids.
And cans.
Oh, yeah. No, we did, for sure. We had that consciousness then.
Okay, I'm
definitely.
just kidding.
Anyway, or I don't know if it was one of those times, but so I'm crossing that deepest part right by the bank.
Scary.
And I step on something that's not natural. What is that? And it wasn't the deepest part, so I bend over and I picked it up. And it was a dragoon sword from the 1840s.
A sword.
Still had
a saber.
A saber.
Wow.
Saber,
What?
probably more accurately. And it still had the
Did you
leather
get
on
cut
it.
on it?
No, the sand had scoured it
It was
down.
all rusted.
Although maybe it had been buried all that time and just been exposed,
Yeah.
because the leather was
Scoured
still
out.
intact.
Holy cow.
Well, so, I proudly had that hanging
So
in
wait,
my...
from when? Who would have dropped it?
Well, Smith's Crossing. This was a military
soldier.
crossing. So, who knows? At the time, I didn't know that, and I thought, what is this here? Why is this here? Did somebody just throw it here? Did it wash down? Which it could have washed, God knows, some flood or something.
Someone crossing in high water and just maybe the horse fell over
exactly.
and they lost it.
Right, and it'd been there till I stepped on it. I don't know, but
That's so cool.
It was fascinating. And it wasn't until, I don't know how later, maybe years later, that I learned about... there's a guy named Root who wrote about fairies in Kansas, in the Kansas historical collections. Over many volumes, I don't know if anybody put them all together into one publication, but he talks about all the crossings and all the ferries. And it's fascinating because if you find those, then you find all the old trails, because that just didn't exist in a vacuum. It had,
Yeah.
you
need
two
to find
directions
an easy place to cross.
where it came from and where it was going.
Yeah.
And anyway, so unfortunately, I used it in Menninger had something called the Summer Winter Theater, and I let somebody use it in a production, and it disappeared. It was gone. Also, my father's .22 rifle. I was naive.
Oh my gosh.
Anyway.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, I mean and I'm such a history buff,
So
that really tied me.
Oh yeah.
To learn more.
So you've researched all the native camps and all the cultural history in that area in particular, or up and down the Kaw, or?
Well, there was this ethnographer, James Owen Dorsey, in 1880s, who was with the Smithsonian. He came to Kansas, or no, by 1880s, he went to Oklahoma and interviewed the Kaw elders. And
after they were removed.
After they went to Oklahoma in 1873. And much grief over that. It was just horrible. Anyway, he went to interview these elders, and he took copious notes, and he drew maps, 2 different maps of where all the Kaw villages had been, that these older men could remember, and the sacred hills, and all kinds of stuff.
And where our pink rock, our sacred red rock in Lawrence here was from. And Robert Rankin, a professor at KU of linguistics, who passed away in 14, I think, he helped the tribe develop a Kaw dictionary. And many, many of the words come from James Owen Dorsey, his notes. Because it wasn't only the map, it was the language, words for everything. And it was, I went to the Smithsonian myself and looked at the original stuff and back in, the 80s maybe, and got copies of everything. And I have since shared the maps with all kinds of people, crediting the Smithsonian, of course. But I've been trying to show the tribal people where I think these villages were, but it just hasn't happened yet. Well, you know about the glacial erratics, the pink quartzite, and the Kansas tribe working to take the monument here that the founders of Lawrence, not the founders, but early, 1929, citizens of Lawrence created here, and now the process of the Kaw people taking it back. But there was probably many of those sites with distinct boulders up along the Kaw. I know at least around the Wamego area there's a lot of those boulders there.
Mostly burials.
Oh, okay. On the hills?
Not from the
uplands?
Not from the Kanza. The Kanza didn't come until the 1600s.
The earlier tribes.
Yeah, from much earlier tribes, like 1,500 years ago.
So those hilltop burial sites.
They've all been desecrated.
Yeah.
I mean, I imagine there was one on Mount Oread. I don't know that for a fact. We might be too far east, but in Manhattan, where the water tower was, there was at least one grave destroyed when the water tower went in, and then above where it says KSU above the river, there was one there that was destroyed.
Destroyed, and now it's woods grown over.
Well,
right?
Yeah, and then most of them were looted because they were so obviously not natural features. And where else? Burnett's Mound in Topeka. It's the main hill in southwest Topeka. About I-70 goes across its north flank around Gage.
Oh, okay.
And by the way,
That's near the river.
No, that's that's the southeast corner of that's Potawatomi Reservation. The 30 by 30 is around 29th and Gage in Topeka. And Chief Burnett lived right there. That's why it's called Burnett's Mound. And he's actually buried nearby. And the good thing is that's recently had a new fence put around it. I mean, people are trying to do the right thing these days. It's hard climate to do it. But, yeah.
Well, any other things you can tell me about? I don't know. If you've watched Friends of the Cause from afar, maybe, or what do you think the Friends of the Cause legacy will be 50 years from now or whatever? Like, just asking about the evolution of the organization and the work.
Well, basically, I don't remember your bylaws or your mission statement, but it's about education. It's about educating people about their natural environment and how to take care of it. Because if you look back at ever since the first Earth Day, and even before that, actually, at Mount Mitchell, the uncle of the Mitchell boys, their mother's brother-in-law, is credited with saving the buffalo. You know, he was part of the Smithsonian at the time, and he and Teddy Roosevelt got together. Did that throw me off? What was I saying?
Just the evolution and legacy of Friends of the Cause, the importance of the organization.
That it's not just the cause, is my point. It's the cultural history. Because early on, I noticed out in the memorabilia, the Kaw Valley Heritage Alliance was a wonderful group. I don't know if they even still exist. I got involved with them around 1999 to start celebrating the sesquicentennial of Kansas Territory. And that brought a lot of historians. And then from that grew the effort to create the Freedom's Frontier National Heritage Area. And the Heritage Area is a melding of historic people who run museums and researchers who are interested in preserving the cultural history, and the economic development folks who want to use that history, market it to bring in tourists, to bring in, businesses that appreciate a culture where they respect their history. So Friends of the Call has done that, and I think in 50 years, maybe more of the groups will merge with the same basic, like Protect the Flint Hills.
There's so many overlapping.
And it's a lot of the same people.
Yeah, I know.
on different
it's like
boards.
In a small community of all these overlapping circles of environmental, which is great. But yeah, I know. Often we think we need to, blend our efforts together.
Yeah.
Whatever. But,
well, because I think as time goes on, the manpower, woman power is going to people power. It's going to be harder and harder. I mean, already, all the groups I know are trying to recruit younger people. I think the group that has the best thing that should be emulated, what a model, is the Prairie Plains Resource Institute in Aurora, Nebraska. I went up with there 30-some years ago when they first founded. Kelly Kincher was on that trip. And they formed, their whole mission is to preserve prairie in Nebraska and to promote prairie restoration. Well, they hold something in the summer called SOAR. And I don't remember what SOAR stands for, but it's bringing young kids to the Platte River, playing in the river for a week and learning all about the river and its ecology. And it's the most fun time for everybody. And the Platte, it's wide and shallow.
Walk for miles.
So it's not, I don't know. You could probably find a place on the Kaw or something like that.
There are definitely those places, but it depends on the previous rain.
But, I'm not sure about this, but I think their current executive director was one of those kids had come as a kid. I know some of their staff is. I'm not sure about the executive director because Bill Whitney and his wife Jan, they, among others, founded it, and Bill retired a year or two ago. But what a model!
Well, Don was mentioning recently here that, we have the kids about water. We have a lot, increasingly getting into schools and getting kids in the streams, and they're learning about macroinvertebrates and seining and doing all this stuff, hands-on stuff. And she said, 8 years later, they're on our paddle trips and like, oh yeah, I did that class. I mean, already, some of these classes these kids are adults now, and they, their first experience of, being on the river at all was Friends of the Caw, and, that's been a mission, get people on. And kids, too. It's a little harder because they have to be a certain age, really, to be on the Caw safely. But, yeah, definitely getting the kids out there, and I wish I could have done that as a kid.
Yeah. Well, let me give one plug. The Native Stone Scenic Byway Committee, the Volun Store, and these two, I think they're retired ichthyologists.
Ichthyologists?
Is that how you say it? I don't know how to say it.
The fish people?
The fish people.
Okay.
The first, I think this year will be the third year, and we hope this becomes a tradition. This year will be the third year. It's called the Fish Wizards Tour.
Oh.
And it's held on the west branch of Mill Creek in Wabunsee County, and Mill Creek is drained in this area mostly off pasture, mostly off grassland, not off farmland. So you're not getting the herbicides and the chemicals and the manure and all that stuff. In fact, with the creek I live on, I think is the cleanest creek in the state, Nearing Branch.
It is very clear.
Yeah. And I've got Topeka Shiner on my property. Anyway, really? I digress. Fish wizards.
No, that's important.
These guys, there's two scientists, experts on prairie fish, and their wives, and then the Volun Store people and the Scenic Byway Committee people. It's this year it's on June 3rd and 4th, Saturday and Sunday. They do 2 sessions, and you go out to the creek, and the hardy people get in there and they seine a section, and then they pull the fish out, put them in plastic containers, and take them around, so you don't have to get in the water if you don't want to, and it's at
cool.
It's at the height of breeding season for the fish, so everybody's in their regalia, and you think you're in the Bahamas or something.
Oh
the
gosh.
Fish are so colorful, and here you see these for the first time, and you think, oh my God, I've lived here my whole life. I didn't know these guys were here. My God. And so you look at the creek completely differently after that.
Yeah.
So it's on the website of the Volun Store, and also...
is it all ages?
Yeah,
Can adults like me do that?
Oh, it's all... No, it's
That
mostly
sounds
older
great.
people with grandkids and things. Yeah.
That is great. I just sent you that picture of that horsehair worm that I found in your creek.
I forgot about that. Wasn't it gross looking? I don't remember.
Well, it just looked like a filament. And
that's
a
right.
copper filament. I'm like, it's moving. It's doing, this thing. And
I forgot all about
it was
this.
a parasite of not humans. We have nothing to fear from this parasite of a cricket. I'm not going to remember the whole story, but anyway.
Okay, I'll look at your email.
Thing that was in your clear stream, tributary of the Caw, of Mill Creek, of the Caw. We don't know what they should look like, these streams, because people don't see a natural. We don't have access either, unless you have, access to public, friends' land or whatever. We don't know what the streams should look like.
That's true.
The Kansas River is the only public space you're allowed to be on, from high water mark to high water mark.
Do you think that'll ever change with the legislature?
I'm not the one to ask, but I think if private property rights ever, they're not going to change.
No.
Anyway, all right. Okay, we need to wrap up here. Is there anything you wished I would have asked you that you wanted to talk about in regards to
You've
the
done
Kansas River? Or
No,
Friends of the Caw, or Hope for the Future, or...
well, this Native American saying, water is life. I mean, you can't get more true than that. And, Kansas historically, thousands of years going back, we can have a 5-year drought where it doesn't rain at all. And, that's when people
start
realize.
thinking about water at all.
Yeah.
Increasingly will be on people's minds when it's forced to be, right?
Right. That's the way we are as human beings, I'm afraid. Okay, well,
Thank you very much. Thanks so much.